Much, Kristen, and thank you all for your time this afternoon. We are going to walk through all of the elements of the 2023 Apprenticeship Expansion grant opportunity. And I want to first start by saying that I want to recognize that this whole process is really intended to have an all-inclusive approach for not only the Title I-B partners, but also all of our workforce education and economic development partners across all of the federal and state funded programs. I think that part of this initial part of the presentation is really to give a level set background and just to briefly go through some of the history of the Apprenticeship Expansion Program, and certainly want to give credit to all of you on this webinar who have been a part of that development and all of the work that you have done at the state, regional, and local levels to develop these models, to implement these models, to work and place apprentices, and to work with businesses and other employers to expand their apprenticeship programs and strengthen their internal workforce. So that's the context of all of this, is to provide a new opportunity that is built on a very solid foundation. And the primary focus of today is to expand on a number of conversations that we've already had throughout the months of April and May, to talk about this funding opportunity, which comes from the U.S. Department of Labor, passed to the state, and then our goal is to get it to the regions and the local areas. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and start the slide deck, which I should say, we will have the slides available for everyone after the slide or after the presentation today. I will also say that this presentation is going to be very, it will follow all of the content that was in the funding notice that the Department of Commerce issued a couple of weeks ago. For your reference, it's notice 22 NOT-05, and we can also share a copy of that notice. But you'll see once we get into Jennifer Foyle's part of the presentation, we're gonna go kind of step by step, because we know that there are some elements of the of this notice that is different from a traditional notice of funding opportunity. And we just want to make sure that it's clear and provide opportunities for all the local teams around there. So to start off, just to give a little bit of a background in the framework, and as I noted, more than 5 years ago, the State Workforce Board worked with the state agency partners and other leaders to develop a framework of expanding registered apprenticeships and work-based learning, right? And so there is a need to include this activity in all of our funding streams. So no matter whether it's a U.S. Department of Labor special initiative and special grant, or whether it's a Title I-B, funding through, our training of dislocated workers or adults or even youth, right? It's important to have these apprenticeships and work-based learning opportunities. It's a big priority that has, continued to build, again, throughout the last decade. It's been noted, obviously, that registered apprenticeships is also an important strategy for employers as they look to not only get new employees, but one thing that Illinois has really been successful in is retain existing employees. And so the use of incumbent worker strategies and linking that to registered apprenticeship, I think is a model that from a program standpoint, we have seen be very successful in Illinois, and also from a business development standpoint, makes a lot of sense as it relates to supporting the upskilling of a known commodity, a known worker, who can get some support for additional training. And if we can, put that within a registered apprenticeship framework, even better. Because it's a support for not only the business but also that employee, right? Because then they would have a recognized credential that would make them more valuable, and would also include, obviously those additional skills that they attain through the process. So this is the framework. Many of you have seen this throughout the years, and talked about a framework of apprenticeship navigators and intermediaries. And so the key roles around apprenticeship navigators, some of their core functions, right? To be a key point of contact for apprenticeship expansion activities, to facilitate, the development of apprenticeships with businesses and industry, acting as a convener of regional and to help, kind of that regional coordination within industries, and also support, intermediaries that might be running the programs within a region. Intermediaries, they are kind of the nuts and bolts on the ground, right? So they are running the programs, making connections directly with training providers. They're recruiting, workers. They could be also recruiting, placements and companies. They are providing case management and support to the apprentices. So, really more of that, traditional, program or project manager, for delivering those workforce services. So over the years, we've identified a need to re-envision the navigator role. Initially, the concept was to have an apprenticeship navigator within each of the 10 economic development regions. And so for many years, the state, made that funding opportunity available through our competitive notice of funding opportunities. And we've received we've offered a number of those opportunities over the years. And as the program progressed over the years, that coverage and that interest in taking up the navigator roles, over a region, it ebbed and flowed. And so it's been identified now as a need to kind of reassess that whole approach, and looking at, some of the areas where the apprenticeship navigator roles, where those roles belong, right? And so, the team has, kind of analyzed what projects have been successful. And we've also had a number of conversations with apprenticeship navigators who, kind of give us their feedback and their expertise. And we landed on integrating the navigator roles within the integrated business services team. There was so much overlap, right, as far as what are key roles and responsibilities. The one piece or area of expertise that may not be within those business services teams is that, kind of that expertise around how to develop and expand apprenticeships. And so I think that is the core piece where this funding has the opportunity to support. So this funding is not to supplant, your regular business service team operations. It's intended to expand their capacity and outreach, specifically focused around apprenticeships and work-based learning, right? We received these grant funds from DOL, from US DOL, specifically to expand registered apprenticeships, but we know that the activity of apprenticeship navigators supports the whole kind of apprenticeship Illinois framework, right? All the way from work experiences that could lead into youth apprenticeship, that could lead into a pre-apprenticeship, that leads into a registered apprenticeship, right? We want to support all of those activities from this end of the spectrum all the way to the end. But again, our primary focus and responsibility with these grant funds has to be towards an eye of the registered apprenticeship program, but we want to build the full infrastructure that focuses and supports the outreach functions, the partner coordination functions, and the direct assistance in developing apprenticeships. So we suspect that most of your business services teams has got number one and number two already taken care of, right? Or to a certain degree, you do that all the time. That is something that within your areas of expertise. The last item is most likely not universally is not a capability that is universally held within our business services team. And so therein lies the opportunity around apprenticeship navigators and this funding opportunity. So again, not going to go into a huge level of detail here, but I do want to highlight some of the points on this slide, right? So although you have capabilities and expertise with your outreach, right? We want to focus on a more inclusive pool of apprentices. So the focus around diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And that includes, those considerations across, multiple areas, right? So it could be gender, it could be industry that you're focusing on. It could be race. It could be other factors where the state needs to do more as a whole. Your state, region, local areas needs to do more around recruiting and developing opportunities for job seekers and employers. Also serving as neutral conveners to support the talent pipeline management framework. Kim is going to talk about that in a bit. And then finally, looking at how these navigator teams and your strategies, especially as it relates to their outreach, can support and be highlighted as part of your regional and local planning process. Coordination, again, so we know that this is a key role of business services teams, leveraging all of those relationships and partnering with those that you already have built solid foundations. There is absolutely no reason to go out and try to reinvent the wheel as you work with your existing partners. The idea is to expand and organize that network and provide that awareness around the apprenticeship opportunities. And this is kind of that major piece where we think that these funds can provide a real difference, right? So where you have the ability to directly consult with employers around the development of apprenticeship and other work-based learning opportunities, to help support entities, if it's an employer, if it's an association, if it's you yourself as a local workforce area, as a registered apprenticeship sponsor, what are the resources that are needed to support that practice? And also we're going to talk about resources and incentives. It's a new thing. So Jennifer is also going to talk about an incentive pool of funds, which some of those allowable activities are similar to what we've always done, or what we've seen as far as, oh, well, we can support related technical instruction. We can support supportive services for apprentices. We can support even OJT to a certain degree. But now there's some new flexibility around some apprenticeship development costs, the actual costs of developing all of the internal structures and documents that might be needed to develop a registered apprenticeship within an employer. So bottom line with this part of the section is that the roles and responsibilities of the apprenticeship navigators, are shifting from more of a geographically based, model to more of a integration based model, where we're looking to leverage our existing resources within the integrated business services teams. We know that this process will continue to clarify roles and responsibilities, and we welcome everyone's feedback as this these roles continue to be reshaped and refined as part of our 5-year planning process. And I think Jennifer is going to talk a little bit about that as well. But as a preview, one of the requirements of receiving the funds from the U.S. Department of Labor is that the state is required to develop a 5-year apprenticeship plan. And we're going to go through a lot of those goals and activities at the state and local level. But this piece is really one of those fundamental pieces that I anticipate we're going to have some good discussion on. And I will say that we are not locked in to one approach. If there is feedback that shows, hey, you know what, doing it this way just isn't working out, we need to rethink this. The state isn't locked into a specific method. So the bottom line is that we do have flexibility, and we want to support the models that are going to be most effective. All right, so with that, I want to just pause there and open up and see if anybody has any questions, just on like kind of the background of all of this before we get into the more specifics on the program elements. All right, so don't see any questions yet, and that's okay. So we'll go back to the PowerPoint, and Kim, if you want to kind of take it from here on Talent Pipeline.
Thank you, John. Go ahead and advance. There you go. Across the state, there are many different businesses coming together to address some of their common pain points that they're dealing with, whether it be upskilling for incumbent worker employees, or retaining those individuals so they're not leaving the workforce or being recruited away by competitors, but also is how do they fill those unfilled job postings. So talent pipeline management is a strategy to address these issues at a regional level, a local level, as well as a state level. So one of the things that we are doing with TPM is we're moving from a transactional mode of doing a one-off with each industry or each business to a more transformational. Be coming together and sharing those resources, we have maximum capacity, and we can leverage the ROI by working collectively rather than against each other. So our navigators being integrated into our business service teams, will still serve as that neutral convener. And it's very important that that the neutral convener is looked at as a individual or an entity that is going to be able to look at very critical granular data, and that data stays with you and you only. And the reason why is because you're going to have competitors sitting across the table with you when you create your industry partnerships, and they're going to want to make sure that any of the information they share with you, whether it be just confidential or proprietary information in your data collection, it stays that way. So trust is going to be a key factor here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, across Illinois, there are many different industry partnerships already coming together to try to address these needs, but they're lacking the direction or the support with the TPM strategies. And this is very critical to addressing these turns. So DCEO has actively been engaged in using talent pipeline management as the foundation for Apprenticeship Illinois. But it can also be used for across all the sectors and all the different workforce solutions under the local workforce systems. So we're moving from a transactional to a transformation. And I wanted to share with you, when we say we're going to provide the training and support for TPM, I just want to give a quick shout out that we just wrapped up an hour ago in Illinois TPM Academy. And with that, we had 18 participants go through it, and they worked on projects in sectors such as electrical vehicle charging stations, increasing the Latinx recruitment into the nursing field, or looking at pre-apprenticeships for construction industries. And through this process, they have developed very solid plans of moving forward to address these skill needs within these respective sectors. Next slide. So what is TPM? TPM has 6 key strategies, and in these is, first of all, is how do we organize these employer collaboratives and have the business service teams and navigators lead this charge. In strategy 2, this is where it really starts to get into the meat and potatoes of the process, but really looking at critical job demands and hearing directly from our employers on where those skill gaps are for either new or replacement positions. And there are tools that are available to help design these surveys so we can collect this information at a local area. This information can also be used with your local plans or your regional plans that you submit to the state of Illinois. In strategy 3, what we're looking at is how do we align and communicate the job requirements so we can, as a business sector, really communicate more effectively with our training provider what our actual needs are. In strategy 4, what we do is we look at where are we finding our talent. And this is very key. It's how we try to diversify our workforce. Are we missing untapped talent pools, and how do we tap into those resources so we can increase the DEI across all the sectors, but also looking at reducing those barriers for individuals who are trying to even re-enter the workforce, or looking at out of school youth as well. And all of this aligns very well with the ROI that the local WIOA's local workforce areas are evaluate on an annual basis. And then in strategy 5, what we're doing is we are tearing down the silos that exist within each of our regions. All of us know there are different programs out there. We know that there's programs within sister agencies, but when we come together and we build that supply chain, we can see very clearly where the gaps are, but we can also see the partners that either we have overlooked, or how do we build that supply chain from early education all the way up through retention for employers. And as with any process, what is the ROI? What is the continuous improvement? And when you, as a a business service team, when you start to collect these strategy 2 on an annual basis, it paints a very, very crystal clear picture of what's happening within your region. So it could impact economically, from an economic development standpoint, from a workforce development standpoint, even a funding standpoint. Next slide. So using the integrated business service teams. So what we're having you do with this new initiative is really just, as I mentioned earlier, is we're creating those sector-based approaches and moving more from a one-off all the time with an employer to more looking at a platform, to looking at all the needs from the business and the workforce partners. Again, we're looking at it from a regional in nature. And when you see that need, there's a lot of other data points that we can help you look at and to align what your needs are and to develop those workforce solutions, but also in your long-term regional planning. And we're coordinating all of these efforts, as I've already previously mentioned, as we all have different programs that we're working on, but are we aware of those programs, not only within your local training providers, but in your K through 12 school districts, within your region and other training providers, not just your community colleges or your universities, but what about the nonprofits who have a very successful training program, or your trades programs as well. And so it really, when you bring all of the strategies together, it really unites everything. So it's not one organization struggling with it by themselves, but you're leveraging across your region, across your county, and even across the state of Illinois, knowing that when you have a group come together, the voices are stronger, and you can even make leverage removing those additional barriers that are out there. For example, if we know that there is a large initiative that's needed to address a very specific business sector, knowing what those needs are at a local, regional, or state level can help, even with the state, with long-term funding and budgeting to help meet those needs as well. So TPM is completely flexible, it's alignable, and it's allowable with everybody. So it's not that you may have a particular business that says, I'm going to set this out for right now, I want to see where this goes. That's okay. But when you create your business sectors with it, as when you're starting to market that approach, when you're seeing the results with it, what happens is those who were sitting on the fence, they want to come and they want to engage in this because they see the ROI in this process. The other ROI on this is many of the integrated service teams, the LWIA boards and so forth, they struggle with that employer engagement component of it. And this is one way to bring the businesses to the table. Next slide. So there are 5 necessary components for the business service team. Is number 1, looking at your organizational structure, which enables open communication across all the partners. And it becomes a very reliable strategy as you're moving forward. It's managed by real-time data and business intelligence through this. So you're not guesstimating what the needs are, because the data is going to speak for itself through the different surveys that are involved. And when you're developing your solutions, it's instead of waiting for a solution to just resolve by itself and so forth, you're developing a very comprehensive plan moving forward to develop those solutions, not just, again, for that one employer or 2 employers, but for all the employers within your sector partnership. And it's really emphasizes the work-based learning pieces of it as well. As John mentioned earlier, we've used TPM in the Apprenticeship Illinois initiative. And this way we can bring the work-based learning to the forefront for many of the employers. To give you an example, if you're developing an apprenticeship program for one employer, what if you're looking at those multiple employers coming to the table, they all say the need, you align the competencies, you align the respected credentials involved with it. And instead of creating one program for one employer, you created one program for 10 employers, and then you increase the amount of apprentices going through a work-based learning experience. TPM is very accountable. It's very, you can look at the measures on it as well from your performance at a local workforce area, as well as measures and outcome that the business sectors can set to look at their ROIs. So basically, when you put TPM and you put the business service teams together, technically what you have is all the functions of the apprenticeship navigators. John, you're muted.
Thank you. So I will just pause there to see if anyone has any kind of questions on the, kind of on the setup. The foundation has been laid for the buildup of, all right, well, now let's talk about this funding opportunity, the nuts and bolts. Any questions on kind of the program design behind this?
So John, a question did come through on the chat. It says, given the regional lens that John talked about, are we applying for this grant as a region?
Yeah, it is an option and an encouraged option, right? So if you can coordinate, at a larger level, that would be encouraged. It's not required, but it is encouraged. Okay, so Jen, you want to go ahead and any other questions? Sorry, before, or are we good? All right.
Yeah, let's go ahead. All right, so now I'm going to walk you through about, our application, or the FOA from DOL, our application to them, and then the notice of funding that we put out for you guys. So DOL is looking to allocate their apprenticeship funds to states in a different way. So they had $40 million set aside for formula funding. So this is formula-based funding for the state. So the formula for Illinois would give us about $1.3 million. They anticipate this will be the same for the next 5 years. Our application that we gave them was for the first year only for 1.3 million. And we had to give a pretty detailed scope of what we were going to do for the first year, even though we had a very limited time to put that together. So we appreciate all of you who did help us do that. And then we were told that we have, upon receipt of the award, hopefully July 1st, then 120 days later, we have to provide a 5-year comprehensive plan at the state level. We're actually going to ask for an extension because we want to roll this 5-year comprehensive plan into the state's planning process with all of the partners and stakeholders needed. So we actually really want to take it seriously because it does require very much a lot of detail, and it is based on this base formula funding for per year. I keep saying base funding because we do have the option within the next 5 years to go in one time for a huge competitive grant if we want. If we have some great idea what we want to do with the state of how to expand apprenticeships for certain industries or occupations or whatever, we have that opportunity. And that's what we want to figure out in our 5-year plan as we're doing our 5-year plan too, because it would take an effort from all of our partners to go in for this big competitive grant. We're going to distribute it like we do the Rapid Response 1E funds to the LWIMs, to the local workforce innovation boards. We anticipate that we'll distribute $1 to $1.2 million for this apprenticeship expansion for this 1 year, and the range per grant will be $75,000 to $175,000 based on the activities and potential impact. Yeah, next slide. So goals and activities. So like I said, we had to put together this application. We had to state what our goals were and what our activities were for the next year. And I'll just go ahead and tell you what they encourage. So some of the activities they encouraged in the FOA was to increase apprenticeship staff at the state or local areas, to build stronger partnerships within the state, local workforce, and education system, to improve or create communications among those partners, draft policies and procedures, create or improve outreach and marketing materials, improve employer engagement, and collaborate with all partners across the state. So their whole encouraged activities was this whole state, building state's capacity and building those strong partnerships. It's really about building this whole apprenticeship ecosystem throughout the state. So what I'm putting here is the goals. We identified 5 goals. These goals we felt like would help guide us over all 5 years. And these are the activities that we're asking at each of the local areas. And in a minute, I'll show you what the difference is between what the state will do at the state level and then what the local areas. So the first goal, that is it's the core planning process. So there'll be planning, of course, every year, but we ask at the state level, at the local levels, that when you're planning your local region area, look at what your local apprenticeship ecosystem is. And so, ecosystem, we're using that word. Everyone's using that word right now, it seems like. So what is an ecosystem? I would say that your ecosystem is all your partners, all your training providers in your area. Are there any existing apprenticeships or pre-apprenticeships in your area? Any work-based learning in your area? What are some of the employers that are very much participating in anything that could be part of the apprenticeship ecosystem, whether it's partners, training, businesses, supportive services, some nonprofits that support them, anything that's supporting registered apprenticeship or to get to that is part of the ecosystem. So we ask that you document it. Of course, that's living document because it will change and grow as you all grow. But then also to incorporate that into your local and regional plan. Goal 2, this is system development, support, and outreach. So at the local level, we're asking that you develop the necessary framework to permanently embed the navigator functions into your business service teams and into the integrated business service team. So that includes your core partners as well. And at this part, you're building that infrastructure, you're creating strong regional partnerships and collaborations. So the action item, I know that many of you are already doing this. This is just a way of solidifying it and showing that you're looking at the work-based learning and registered apprenticeship continuum in these efforts that you're doing. So next slide, please. Goal 3. So the next 3 goals are about coordinating and expanding services to different partners. And this one is to workforce and economic development partners. So we ask that you participate with us, the design and development of standardized training for all business service teams. So we want there to be a consistent message or consistent resources available to everyone. And we feel like a lot of you are already doing good work and we want to build on that good work. So we're asking for those ideas. So we're asking that you help figure out what it is that each business service team needs and let us get that out to them. And then we ask that you actually then participate in it as well. So there's going to be some, if you haven't been through any kind of TPM framework training, then we're going to ask that you go through that. We need to figure out, so if you look at the data I'm just going to do a sidebar. If you look at the data for the state of Illinois, we're doing a great job of increasing the numbers of women in apprenticeships and increasing the number of underrepresented groups in apprenticeships. However, the completion rates are low for those groups. So we're not doing a great job of retaining them in apprenticeships. So we need to come up with some kind of DEI plan, but then also implement it. And that may be actually helping train the companies of how do you retain those apprentices as well. let's see. And then we also ask that you play a part in the Apprenticeship Illinois Partner Collaboration meeting. So you're going to do those at the local level on your own, but then we also hope to have a summit at the state level, a yearly summit as well. And we'll bring people together either via Zoom or in person at different times to collaborate. Goal 4, coordinate and expand services to employers. So this is at the local level, we're asking that you help us to support us in the design of new employer incentives. A big incentive we have out there already is the tax credit. Is there a way we could make it better, or a way that to reduce kind of friction that people take up that opportunity? Also, we know that a lot of employers are incentivized by the RTI, the related training being paid for, or some of the on-the-job training to be paid for. What are some other incentives that would work for employers? You guys work with employers, you would know best, so we're asking that you help us. Then also to offer them to the employers. Then also connect employers and increase industry-specific employer collaboration. So we want to connect them, connect them to our other partners, maybe your training provider, maybe it's community college. We might connect them to a school district. We might connect them to some community-based organizations, but also increase the awareness of registered apprenticeship and the benefits to them. And then we ask that you either, help develop those registered apprenticeship programs as a sponsor, or you help develop sponsors out there, because we've seen or have heard from employers that dealing with the paperwork or actually getting the program registered is a barrier for them. It's just an extra step. If we can reduce the risk for them taking on the sponsorship, taking on the different case management or different paperwork, they may actually want to participate more. So asking that you do that, the services to employers. And just a note on that, that we are an office of an OA state. So like half the states in the United States are SAA states. That means they have a state apprenticeship agency. We do not. And so we only have a few DOL registered or apprenticeship training representatives. And so there's only a few of them around the state. And that's why we're here to help support those efforts. And the final goal, coordinate and expand services to workers, job seekers, and intermediaries. So this is to identify and implement customer-centered DEIA strategies around recruiting and retaining, and support curriculum development that meets employers' needs. So that's working with your training providers, your community colleges, your school districts, things of that nature, to ensure that they're getting the curriculum they need. Okay, so here's just comparing what we're asking you to do on the local level, but then what we're going to do at the state level. So at the state level, we have said that we're going to put together an ecosystem map. And so we're going to look at the ecosystem at the state level. And in order for us to do that, we need to know what's going on at the regional level. That's why we're asking that you help us document that. We're going to put together, with input from you all, an Apprenticeship Illinois Expansion Manual. So any kind of new partner that comes on board through your integrated services teams or other partners, we've got this manual that you all can refer to that's actually helpful, that can help with the consistent messaging, or if you have any questions at certain times. And of course, that's a living document that will continue to grow and be revised as we know better, we'll do better. We're going to recommend having recommendations for new funding tools, and we're going to create that 5-year comprehensive state apprenticeship plan, which we need your help with as well. We will create a working group that works with the state unified plan working group to ensure that it's incorporated in the state plan as well. Goal 2 for system development at the state level, we're developing a customer relationship management, for lack of a better word, kind of tool and referral system so that you all can share information. I know that some of you may already have your system, so we would like this where it could be integrated with what you have already. But it's important that if you have a large network that's working with employers, a large team, a lot of partners, that you all be able to understand who all's working with who and not step on each other's toes. So we're putting that together at the state level. We're also putting together a marketing proposal for consistent messaging and outreach. We've already started working with a marketing, we've contracted a marketing organization that's going to help us with this, put together standardized marketing materials that you all can use in your areas, and put together an outreach toolkit. And here we, for at your level, we want you to create those strong regional partnerships, develop those sector strategies, use these materials and marketing materials, and also you can have input on how to make them better as well. Goal 3, when coordinating and expanding services to workforce and economic development partners at the state level, we're going to design and leverage or develop new cross-training content and materials. There is a lot out there, but we don't want you to have to weed through everything. So we're going to help put things together and put together some cross-training materials. We know that a lot of you are already doing some great work. So already people have volunteered to help create this from the local areas. And I encourage anyone that you have some best practices that you think that others could use, please let us know. We would like your input on developing these materials and this training. We're also going to develop and publish an annual report of outcomes because we want to be transparent of how everything is going. And we ask that you guys participate in design and development, attend the training, and participate in any kind of collaboration meetings. And goal 4, the next slide. So this one, coordinating and expanding services to employers at the state level, we're going to evaluate those existing incentives, like I said, looking at that state tax credit as well as other incentives, and develop some recommendations. We're going to put together an employer playbook and a registered apprenticeship sponsor guide so that could be helpful for you all. We ask that you help support the design of these new incentives, give us ideas, that you help make the employers aware of any kind of incentives that are available, increase participation in industry-specific employer collaboration, and either sponsor or help develop those sponsors in your area for apprenticeships. And then the final goal at the state level for coordinating and expanding services to job seekers. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is what the first year is. And that's why we need your help for the next 5 years, because we don't have all of this figured out, that we want to incorporate the activities that will actually benefit you all and us as a state. But so for this first year, final goal for 5 at the state level, we're going to develop a DEIA and customer-centered design strategies for recruitment and retention, figure out how we can retain our apprentices, put together an apprentice playbook. And as John was talking about, we have more flexibility on different kinds of fundings to support apprentices. So there's this apprentice barrier reduction or other funding that we could put together. And then we want you all to help implement the DEIA customer-centered design strategies and support the curriculum development. So program activities and outcomes. So I'm just walking you through now what's in the notice of funding that you all can see that was released May 11th. We're asking that you tell us about a number of new businesses engaged. This is nothing new. If you've come in for an intermediary or navigator grant, you've seen all of these before. Number of sponsors that receive apprenticeship expansion support, number of partners that will receive your support, businesses that are going to receive incentives. Engaged is a loaded question. I just saw that pop up. Engaged is at different levels. We know that as soon as you talk to an employer, they are not ready to sign the dotted line on becoming a registered apprenticeship. So it is a process, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Number of events that you're going to have, number of attendees at these events, and this of course is a projection, number of industry sector partnerships, employer collaboratives that you're going to develop. The next page is just continued. It's number of industry sector partnerships, collaboratives. I think I just said that. Number of new programs developed, number of existing programs expanded. You know, there are programs in Rapids that show 0 participants. So it could be low hanging fruit of actually helping. They've actually gotten it registered. It's like, we're going to go and now actually help it, make them jumpstart it. And so expanding it, getting new ones on the eligible training provider list. You know what, that's actually easy. As soon as they are registered, they can go on the eligible training provider list immediately. It's just a matter of letting it be known that they are now a registered program. New pre-apprenticeships developed, new existing pre-apprenticeships expanded, and a number of employers engaged that adopt the apprenticeship model. Yes, pause at this point.
Yeah, why don't we pause? I think we saw a couple questions came in the chat, and if you want to, if anybody has questions, if you want to raise your hand, and then Kristen would unmute you. And I would.
Yes, it looks like Tony raised.
Okay, yeah, please
his
go ahead, Tony.
hand. Tony, I'll let you talk. You should be able to talk now.
Thanks. So just a couple comments on the marketing piece. If you go to the Apprenticeship Illinois website, several of those things that Jennifer talked about are sort of in their infancy there to take a look at. We had developed a toolkit to market at the local level. We collected a lot of the forms that were being used at the local level and tried to compile them on the website. So not a starting from 0 point that's already out there in that form. They need to be standardized. There was a lot of flexibility and no standardization, but they are there.
Thank you, Tony. And you're so right. There's so much work that's already been done at the committee level, as also at some of the local workforce areas already. And John is showing us the apprenticeshipillinois.com website. You know, if you see, it says illinoisworknet.com/apprenticeship. If you just do apprenticeshipillinois.com, it will go there. If you do apprenticeshipil.com, it will take you there.
Yep.
And I think that's really a good point for people to start to see what's there and what the vision was for the state and to move forward from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Tony, you also had a point around you know, just number of sponsors. And I was just thinking as we were going through that last 2 slides, those are some points that we can add, you know. So I think that within your application, you can add other measures, right? I think that this is, you know, we're trying to identify common activities and measures that have been used before, but there may be others, and certainly you know, you adding the local area or your partners as sponsors would definitely be an awesome outcome.
Yeah, I would tell you that I think when we were really pushing that, I know we got up to probably 8 to 10 of the 22 local areas had been registered with DOL as sponsors. So there's a good chunk already who are registered as sponsors with DOL.
Yeah, and that again, I think from a state planning perspective, that could be one of our goals, right? We say, oh, well, if we're at 8 this year, does it make sense to go to 12, you know, in the next year, depending on where everybody is at and the level of interest. Okay, other questions?
Yeah, so there was one question. Is there a cost of the TPM training? If so, is that cost allowable for business service teams to attend the training? And oops.
Yeah, and so I think with that, I think there could potentially be a cost with that. I know that this year we've had TPM training in Illinois. I know traditionally it is out in Washington. In the past, those costs have been allowable as part of the grants, and I think we'll probably put that together, as well as all these questions. We'll put them into like a frequently asked questions and provide more complete answers for some that need more explanation, and that one would definitely, we can expand on. Same thing around the I think there was a question around you know, how do you define engagement? We can do that through the FAQ. I think that, It's not we sent out a mailer to a bunch of companies. So that's not an engagement. It's like if you're having a conversation, or if they're at an event with you and if they got some type of value added, like that's kind of the sniff test there, but we can further define it for you. And as far as like, well, when you're counting your metrics, right? So is it a new engagement versus an old engagement? We can also kind of put parameters around that just for consistency's sake, because it will be important, obviously, as we measure, the impact of this work.
John, this is Kim. If I could just interject for a second with the TPM training, they have gone to 2 online training sessions, so it's convenient for everyone. One is there is an completely self-paced online training option, and then there is a blended learning, but it's still online as well. So both of those do have fees attached to it, and we can provide that information in a follow-up FAQ.
Yeah. See, great. Thank you, Kim. And there's another question here about registered apprenticeship sponsor have their name added to the ETPL. Yeah, we should look into that. I think that's another. Again, it's just having the program added to the ETPL is one. I'm not sure about like the sponsor. If you're referring to the program itself or the sponsor, we would probably need to just clarify that question a bit. Okay, other questions? Okay. Regional approach. Okay, great. All right. Well, I think we've answered everything in the chat, unless I've missed something. So Jen, I know we've got about a half hour left that's scheduled. So if you want to take us into the nuts and bolts of this, we'll switch over to the presentation and take us to the home stretch here.
All right. So we had already said the funding range will be 75,000 to 175,000. We're encouraging the local workforce innovation boards to work with the regional partners to come in for this. Consideration given to geographic distribution, and of course, all the requests need to be reasonable, necessary, and directly related to the notice. I think that goes without saying. Next slide. All right, so in the notice that was released, everything for your application is in attachment A. So if you take attachment A and complete it, you will have your application put together. So, so we're asking for a project narrative. Tell us about your integrated business service team, the projected outcomes, your budget, a budget narrative, and a project implementation plan. So next slide, please. In the project narrative, we're asking for an executive summary where you just summarize, what you're doing right now, how you would use the apprenticeship expansion funds, and what you're doing right now with your business services teams and partners. Describe what's going on locally or regionally for you. We also then want you to end this project narrative to hit every single goal. So each of the goals that I went through, we ask that you put information in that goal. So we gave you prompts to how to answer, how to create your project narrative for us. So if you just start typing in there and answer these prompts, then you've got it. So we're asking you to describe how you're going to inventory or document your regional apprenticeship ecosystem and how you plan to build the apprenticeship ecosystem in your area. And integrate it within your local plan. For goal 2, we gave you prompts as well. So describe how you're going to embed these navigator functions into your local workforce area and within your integrated business service teams. And we ask that you describe how you're going to create those strong regional partnerships and collaboration. If you're doing this already, then describe that to us, how you will continue and then improve upon it. Goal 3, we ask that you describe your commitment to participate in the design and development of the training. How can you help us design and develop? So this is where you can give us some ideas of things that you're already doing, of how you could give us input into the training, and then how you're going to participate in the training itself. your commitment to DEIA, and then what you've seen there in your area, and using the TPM framework, and your commitment to participate in, collaboration meetings and events as needed. And most of these collaboration convenings will be the ones that you actually create and you are doing in your region. Goal 4, for coordinating and expanding services to employers. So we're going to ask you, here's the prompts. We're going to ask you to describe or affirm your commitment to support the state in designing new employer incentives, how you're going to work with employers to offer those incentives to establish new or expand existing programs. Describe how you collaborate with employers to increase awareness on work-based learning opportunities all the way to registered apprenticeship. So we're not asking you just to jump right into registered apprenticeship with all employers. And describe how you will develop registered apprenticeships or support other organizations to become that sponsor. And finally, for 5, here's the prompts for you for coordinating and expanding services to workers, intermediaries. Please describe how you will identify and implement DEIA around recruitment and retention of workers, and describe how you will support curriculum development that meets employer needs. So we've given you the prompts. If you just start doing it, then you've got your project narrative put together with these. Then we put in a table that we ask you to complete, and this is your integrated business services team. So what team are you proposing that you're all working together and going to expand apprenticeship together? So we've put some prompts in here. Who are your partners? But definitely add more. You could add, chambers of commerce. You could add community-based organizations. You could add school districts that you're working with. Whoever your team is, put those people. Go ahead and identify them for us here. These are the ones I read out to you before. So we're just asking you that you put in here what you're projecting by doing these activities, how you're going to move the needle for registered apprenticeships based on these metrics. So it's just anticipated outcomes. For budget, we ask that you put the amount that you're going to choose, you're going to spend on these specific categories. Now, later you'll see that these specific categories will have definitions, and then you'll for anyone that you're putting an amount in here, then we ask that you provide a narrative for. But we'll see that in a minute. So you'll just put the amount here, and in the next table for budget. Oh, here, this is I'm sorry. Here's the incentives for employers. It says that we can use up to 20% of our grant funds to provide one-time incentive funds for new employers. And it could be used to, if you want to put incentives within your application for employers, these are some ideas of what you would do around that, what you include in your budget.
Right. And sorry, Jen, this was a curveball.
Yeah.
Just threw you.
It was a curveball.
I stuck this slide in because this is something that I think I alluded to is brand new, like in this funding stream. And so it's important. So like when we look at this budget table, right, everybody kind of understands, if you've done grants with us before, you kind of understand what all of these activities are. Well, incentives, that's a brand new definition. And here it is, right? And so we've all done costs to support related training, even OJT and supportive services, but it's these other things. So this is where like kind of, hey, this may be some additional flexibility, right? So really think about, has there been some activities that your teams have wanted to do, or are there other barriers that could get tucked away into incentives? And so it's an area that we definitely want to explore with all of you.
This one, we're just asking you to kind of just project an estimate of what you believe the budget is according to the goals. So we feel like you'll do probably more around the coordinating and expanding services, probably, rather than the actual, planning and system development. Of course, you'll be doing that as well, but we ask that you kind of project where your budget is going for each of the goals. Here's what I was talking about. You will have what definitions are for each of the budget items. And so we give you the definitions, but we ask that under each one that when you do put an amount for it, for under each one of these, you provide a budget narrative of exactly how you're using that money. Then for anyone who's come in for one of the grants before for navigators to intermediaries, we ask that you put together a project implementation plan. So what are the goals and activities? What's the timeline? Who's responsible staff? And what do you believe the deliverables are? So we're asking that you submit these by June 15th. We're going to review them on a first come, first served basis. And we want them by June 15th so that we can have the funds committed by June 30th, so that when we get the award July 1, we can hit the ground running. So that's the concept behind there.
And just a note there, we will not obviously have grants in your hand by July 1, but the goal is to have funding commitments. We are going to work to establish the grants in late July and August, but it would have a prior incurred costs going back to July 1, and we would get those established ASAP. One of the key again, the reason we're using this funding method is because of the accelerated timeline from DOL. And we technically can't even award grants until we have that award from US DOL. And so there are some moving parts here, but we want to get commitments in hand as soon as possible.
See, of course, there's the quarterly reporting requirements on the grant activities and outcomes. Fiscal management program funded by USDOL. It's a cost reimbursement, and then allowable, costs must be associated with allowable apprenticeship expansion activities and documented in accordance with 2 CFR Part 200. And they will be included in annual monitoring of local workforce areas. You will submit your grant application, hopefully by June 15th. Please feel free to do it earlier if you would like. That would give us more time for reviewing. But you do at the same email that we've always done. And again, it's attachment A. When you look at attachment A of that notice, if you just complete attachment A, you have put together your application to us.
So I don't know if you're seeing this. So this is the notice, and here is attachment A. So again, just kind of reiterates everything that we've pulled out here and put into the slide deck and the forms that Jennifer just went through. So we've tried to make this as straightforward as possible. I guess from there, we're at the end and ready for another round of questions. It looks like there was a question about, I think, WIOA eligibility. These are not tied to eligibility requirements. The funding source is Apprenticeship USA. And so that does not have the WIOA Title I or other title eligibility requirements. There is, we can pull that down from the last round, and the we'll include that in the FAQ. Okay, just to be certain. So it's just crystal clear with that. But again, our understanding is it is not specific to WIOA. Let's see, projected outcomes. Are there benchmarks? I don't think that we have benchmarks that would be established. That may be something that we considered as part of like the planning process. But certainly proposals will be looked at against each other as it relates to what is the kind of what's the value added and return on investments for the grant funds as it relates to the activities that you're proposing. We know that each one of those benchmarks is not necessarily it's not comparing apples to apples, right? So we know that some of that, for instance, being a registered apprenticeship sponsor and creating a new sponsorship is a much heavier lift than simply putting a registered apprenticeship program on the eligible training provider list, right? I mean, that's so we get it. There's a, you know, everything is like will be reviewed in the context. And if there's a question, that's the opportunity, right? I would say that although we have prompts, you are it's open for you to expand and provide us as much information as you think the team or the state team needs to understand your project and to make a case for the activity that you're requesting to be funded. You know, I think that one of the messages we want to send is that we don't have all of the answers with this. We're basing what we're requesting on a solid foundation, but this is a evolutionary process, and we want this to, you know, move to the next level, and we can only do that with your help. I think there was a question about there's the funding range per WIA. Yeah, generally, I think that was our concept of, you know, the 75K to 175 per area generally. But if you go regionally, again, just, you know, it's all about the reasonableness of your cost and the activities that you're going to propose. You know, certainly we're going to look at the geographic distribution of awards as a piece of this. And so depending on how many areas come in may depend on you know, how much of your proposal we can support through this funding source. But the bottom line is that we're going to try to expand this you know, as far out as possible. Let's see. Other questions that have come in. Let's see, Norm, a new company added to an existing program at a community college count as a new registered apprenticeship program. I think we'd have to look at more detail. I think we might have to talk offline on that one. And again, I think that we can probably provide a little bit more information as it relates to the counting of like the metrics. I think as long as so we can provide that in the FAQ, but I would say in general terms, if you can provide a context to the activities and outcomes that you're proposing in your narrative, right? So if you can say, you know, we're going to do, you know, these companies and this is the stage, right? You know, include that information as part of your narrative if something needs to be clarified, right? But we can try to provide more detail around the parameters. But generally, we're looking at you know, activities that start July 1 of 2023 moving forward, right? So new businesses engaged, you know, that would be again, you know, someone who you haven't engaged, you know, prior to July 1 of 2023 in a general sense, right? But we can clarify that in the FAQ. All right. Other questions? Or if you have a question, feel free, you know, definitely if you want to raise your hand and speak. Sorry that we don't have the ability to unmute everyone at once. Okay. And others, I don't know if you see any other questions that we missed in the chat. Okay, looks like the chat has slowed down. So
And there's some good comments that I think that we'll have also in the FAQ as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, I guess we'll just kind of wrap it up by saying we really appreciate your time and interest, and those who have been partners. Definitely appreciate your partnership in the past. Look forward to your application hopefully coming in. We're looking for, again, existing and new, and again, looking for opportunities to expand and coordinate. And I would just close by saying that although June 15th is a hard deadline, and we hope to have a big level of interest, if there are funds available left remaining, we would continue to accept applications after June 15th. You just wouldn't have a commitment necessary. You wouldn't be included in this first mix of funding commitments, and we would definitely want to work with you either this year or next year in the next round, because this is, like, I think we've tried to emphasize, we are really seeing this as a great opportunity for the state to plan to bring the whole Apprenticeship Illinois to the next level here. And again, appreciate your time and interest, and we will be in touch with more information. But I will pause just to make sure there's no final questions before we wrap up. Okay. Well, with that, we will say have a great afternoon, and let us know if you do have any other questions, and we'll send out a follow-up with posting of the information that was presented today. Thank you all, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.